From the very first day I set foot in the Moretti household, it was clear that I was not welcome. Amanda made sure to demonstrate this in every possible way, from subtle looks of disdain to venomous comments disguised as harmless jokes. She had always been good at that. Good at manipulating, at hurting without leaving visible marks. At first, I tried to ignore it. I hadn't joined this family for status or money. My marriage to Daniel was built on what we believed to be love and partnership, and I thought that would be enough to silence the whispers. But the truth was, to Amanda, I was a problem that needed to be eliminated. She never accepted the fact that their parents had chosen Daniel as the successor of the family business. He was the youngest son, the one who, in her mind, should have been protected, not the heir. When I entered the picture, her frustration turned into hatred. In her eyes, I was the opportunist who had infiltrated her empire, the woman who had come from nothing, and somehow claimed what she had always believed was rightfully hers. But what Amanda never realized was that I wasn't just any adversary. I watched, I waited, and above all, I never forgot. Family dinners were always a minefield. Between glasses of wine and plastic smiles, she would throw little barbs, testing my patience. "Oh, Clara, that bag is lovely. I almost bought the same one, but I prefer authentic models." Or in front of the other guests. "Wow, it must be hard coming from a simple family and suddenly being surrounded by so much luxury. Have you gotten used to it yet?" I would smile, always smile, not because I wasn't angry, but because I had learned early on that the best way to defeat someone like Amanda was to let her think she was in control. The problem is that people like her never know when to stop. They always want to push further, test limits, cross boundaries that should never be crossed. And then she made the biggest mistake of her life. That night, seated at the long table, in the Moretti mansion, I saw my son flinch beside Amanda. It was a subtle movement, almost imperceptible. Small fingers curled around his napkin, a dry swallow that sent a strange chill through me. I observed from the corner of my eye. My sister-in-law leaned toward him, her lips moving in a whisper I couldn't hear. My son kept his gaze fixed on his plate, motionless. And then I saw it. I saw her fingers pinching the soft skin of my child, her eyes gleaming with something that looked like pleasure. My heart pounded so hard that for a second I thought everyone could hear it. A silent, suffocating rage took over me. "Your mother is a mutt. Soon, she'll fall." I don't know how I managed to contain the storm inside me at that moment. Every fiber of my being screamed for me to get up and put an end to it right there. But I couldn't. Not like that. If I attacked now, I would give her what she wanted. A scene, a scandal, a justification to paint me as the villain. So, I just took a deep breath. I swallowed my anger as if it were poison I had chosen to drink. Amanda didn't know it, but her sentence was already sealed. She thought I would fall. But she was the one about to plummet. The night went on as if nothing had happened. Fake laughter echoed through the room, toasts were raised, and trivial conversations filled the air while my mind worked in silence, processing every detail of what I had just witnessed. My eyes constantly returned to my son, who maintained a rigid posture and kept his gaze down, as if trying to shrink into himself. Amanda, on the other hand, smiled. She smiled as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just marked my son's skin with her cruel fingers. It was a smile of victory. She truly believed I hadn't seen it. My stomach twisted with every second that passed without me confronting her. But no, that woman didn't deserve an impulsive response. What she deserved was something much bigger, much worse. When dinner finally ended, we left the mansion and got into the car. My son remained silent, looking out the window. I started the engine, but before driving off, I took a deep breath and gently called his name. He took a few seconds to look at me. His innocent little face was marked by a shadow that shouldn't have been there. "She hurt you, didn't she?" He looked away. That silence was all the confirmation I needed. "Amanda will never do this to you again." He frowned, as if he didn't believe me, as if he knew that Amanda always won, that she always got away with everything. But this time, she wouldn't. The following days were filled with calculated silence. I knew that, for someone like Amanda, the thing that made her feel safest was the absence of a reaction. She expected me to confront Daniel, to bring the issue, to the family, to cry or make a scene. What she didn't expect was for me to stay quiet. Silence is dangerous. It makes enemies feel confident. They relax, lower their guard, believe they've won. And that's when they are crushed. That same week, I decided to go to the company. I had always been involved in the family business, even if discreetly. It was my job to ensure everything ran smoothly, but something had been bothering me. Small irregularities that seemed to have no owner, strange contracts, financial movements that didn't make sense. I decided to investigate further, and with the help of a trusted accountant, I began to piece together the puzzle. That was when the truth came to light. Amanda and Mauricio were planning to steal the company. The betrayal was laid bare in the documents. The two of them were manipulating contracts and investors to force a crisis within the company. Once the company was vulnerable, they would make an internal move to oust Daniel and take control. My heart raced, not with fear, but with anticipation. The pinch on my son was just a detail. The real war was happening behind the scenes, and I hadn't even known it. What Amanda didn't realize was that while she was scheming behind my back, I was already ahead of her. She thought she was in control, but she was just a piece on the board that I was about to knock down. I spent the entire night awake, sitting in my home office, surrounded by papers, statements, and digital documents that exposed, beyond a shadow of a doubt, Amanda and Mauricio's betrayal. With every line I read, every suspicious transfer, every secret meeting listed in the records, the truth unfolded before me like a portrait of pure cynicism and greed. They weren't just manipulating the company. They were planning to destroy Daniel and drag me down with him. My eyes locked onto the laptop screen, where a spreadsheet detailed the contracts Amanda had altered, creating clauses that would lead us into a dead end. The strategy was subtle and meticulously planned. Once the crisis was triggered, the shareholders, pressured by the chaos, would see Amanda as the most reliable solution. It was brilliant and, at the same time, stupid. They hadn't counted on the fact that I was more observant than I let on. I stood up from my chair and walked to the window. Outside, the city was asleep, but my mind was more awake than ever. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the revelation, but also a dark satisfaction growing inside me. I could have destroyed Amanda right then and there, exposed everything, and ended her within hours. But that would be too quick, too easy. And I wanted her to taste her own downfall before she hit the ground. By the time the sun rose, I already had a plan. First, I needed to ensure that nothing she did would hold any value. That meant nullifying all her attempts to seize control of the company before she even realized it. So I spent the following weeks making discreet moves. I worked in silence, infiltrating my changes into the company like a ghost. I held private meetings with the directors still on our side and, little by little, made the gears turn in my favor. Then I had to ensure that Amanda and Mauricio would have nowhere to run once everything came to light. I hired a private investigator to track their steps, record their conversations, document every dirty attempt at betrayal. And when the first recordings reached me, a cold satisfaction spread through my body. I heard them speak as if they had already won. Clara is smart, but not that smart. She'll never notice until it's too late. When they lose everything, she'll come crawling, begging. I want to see if she still has that superior attitude then. I paused the recording. A wave of contempt surged in my chest. They underestimated me. Amanda thought I would never be a threat, that I would always remain in Daniel's shadow, that I would accept being ignored, humiliated, and treated as a disposable piece. She had no idea what was about to happen. The game had turned, and she didn't even know she was losing. I spent the following weeks preparing for the right moment. Amanda and Mauricio were too confident, believing everything was going according to plan. They hadn't noticed the small changes I had been implementing within the company, nor the strategic signatures I had placed in contracts that would nullify their dirty moves. While they thought they were cornering me, they were the ones being slowly trapped, without even realizing it. The first step in my plan was to ensure the company was no longer in Daniel's name. I knew that if I waited until the last moment, Amanda might try some legal maneuver to trap us in an unfavorable contract. So, in silence, with the help of trusted lawyers, I transferred the entire structure of the company to my name. The process was meticulous. It involved quiet agreements, strategic signatures, and a thorough review of every clause that could be used against me. The day the documents were finalized, I looked at the folder in my hands and felt a delicious chill run through me. The company was now mine. They would only find out when it was too late. The second step was to destroy any possibility of escape. Amanda and Mauricio couldn't simply abandon the scheme and walk away unscathed. I needed to ensure they were crushed. That's why every fraudulent contract they signed, every shady transaction they made, was being archived and documented. The investigator I hired had gathered enough evidence to sink them legally, on top of the recordings we already had. But one detail was still missing. I wanted their downfall to be public. I wanted them to taste the same bitter humiliation Amanda had tried to make me swallow for years. So, I arranged for their collapse to happen in grand style. A family meeting. The pretext? An important decision regarding the future of the company. I invited everyone. The family patriarchs, the shareholders who still had influence, the allies I had won behind the scenes, and of course, Amanda and Mauricio. They arrived with confidence. When they walked into the Moretti mansion that night, Amanda's expression was one of pure arrogance. She truly believed she had won. I watched her from across the room, keeping my face impassive, even though I wanted to smile. She had no idea what was waiting for her. She thought that night would be my ruin, but, in reality, it would be her end. At exactly 8 o'clock, the Moretti mansion's main hall filled with the voices of the family. The environment was as luxurious as ever, but it carried a silent tension that only I seemed to notice. The arrogant glint in Amanda's eyes told me she still believed she was in control. She sat at the table as if she owned the place, crossing her legs slowly, tucking a strand of her blonde hair behind her ear, and casting a superior look at everyone around her. Her husband, Mauricio, sat beside her, attentive, like a loyal dog waiting for orders. Both of them were confident, certain that this was the moment when Daniel and I would fall. I took a deep breath and stood up. Before we begin, I want to thank everyone for being here. Tonight, we will make an important decision for the future of the company. Amanda smiled, tilting her head slightly, pretending to be interested. Of course, Clara. I think it's great that we're finally settling this matter. I'm sure everyone here wants what's best for the family. Her cynicism made me sick. I took a folder of documents and placed it on the table. My eyes locked onto hers, waiting for that confident smile to waver. Exactly, Amanda. The best for the family. That's why I thought it was only fair to reveal something before any decision is made. I slowly opened the folder and pulled out the first document. The Moretti Company is no longer in Daniel's name. The silence in the room was immediate. Amanda's gaze froze at that instant. Her expression of certainty turned into confusion. What do you mean? Her voice came out sharp, but laced with uncertainty. It's in my name now, I continued, sliding the document across the table for everyone to see. I transferred all the shares and control of the company to myself weeks ago. It was as if the gravity in the room had shifted. Amanda grabbed the papers and flipped through them frantically, as if she could find a loophole, a mistake that would allow her to continue with her plan. But there wasn't one. It was all there, signed, sealed, and completely legal. Mauricio's face was pure panic. He looked at his wife, hoping she had an answer. But for the first time in her life, Amanda was speechless. This is impossible, she stammered, her hands shaking as she dropped the documents onto the table. No, Amanda. What's impossible is that you thought you could deceive us. I picked up my phone and pressed a button. The speaker echoed through the room, and then her own voice filled the space. The company is ours by right. By the time Daniel and Clara realize it, it'll already be too late. They'll beg, and I'll savor every second. The recording continued, each word landing like a strike, an unrelenting exposure of the betrayal she and Mauricio had plotted. Everyone in the room turned their eyes to Amanda and Mauricio. Her face drained of all color. Her skin turned pale, and her lips parted without producing a sound. This is manipulation, she screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. Clara, you set this up to incriminate us. I pulled out a second document from the folder. It's all here. The irregular bank transactions, the altered contracts, the secret meetings. Do you really think I would do this without proof? Amanda looked around, searching for support, but she found none. Daniel's parents were in shock, the shareholders murmured among themselves, and Mauricio simply lowered his head, defeated. I stood up slowly, savoring every second. Oh, and there's more. Amanda swallowed hard. All your assets were mortgaged as collateral for a contract that I personally made sure to void. Her eyes widened. What? That means you didn't just lose the company, you're also drowning in debt. The realization finally hit her with full force. Amanda staggered backward as if she had been punched, her gaze filled with tears, and she shook her head, refusing to accept reality. And then her body gave in. Amanda collapsed to her knees, her hands trembling as she tried to process the complete destruction of everything she believed was hers. She tried to bring me down. Now she was the one on the ground. The room was drowned in suffocating silence. Amanda remained kneeling, her eyes wide, her trembling hands clutching the now worthless documents. Her face, once always brimming with arrogance, was now a mask of despair and disbelief. Beside her, Mauricio sank into his own panic, unable to utter a single word. I could have left at that moment. I could have let her sink alone into shame and humiliation, but that wouldn't have been enough. Not after everything. Amanda lifted her eyes to me. For the first time there was no superiority, no mockery, only pleading. Clara. Her voice came out weak, broken by ragged breathing. You can't do this to me. We're family. I smiled, tasting the bitterness in my mouth. Family? You dare say that word to me after everything you've done? She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. You pinched my son, I continued, taking a step closer. You tried to destroy me, tried to ruin Daniel, tried to leave us with nothing. You wanted to see me crawl. But look at this. Who's on the floor now? A tear rolled down her face, but there was no space left for mercy. Daniel's parents were still in shock, unable to look at their daughter with even a shred of sympathy. The shareholders, once respectful toward Amanda, now avoided her gaze, pretending she was no longer part of the Moretti family. I took a deep breath and stepped even closer. She realized too late. My hand rose, and before she could react, I struck her face with a sharp slap. The sound echoed through the hall. Amanda tilted to the side, one hand flying to her cheek, stunned. A murmur spread through the room, and no one dared to intervene. I crouched beside her and whispered into her ear, "That was for pinching my son." I stood up leisurely. Adjusting my coat, I scanned the room, making sure everyone had absorbed what had just happened. Then, with steady steps, I walked to the door. And without looking back, I left victorious. The cold night air hit my face as I stepped outside the Moretti mansion. The absolute silence inside contrasted with the calm of the outside world. But it was a different kind of silence. Not the suffocating, fear-laced one I had left behind, but one of liberation. The night was clear, the sky full of stars, and for the first time in a long while, I felt my shoulders relax. I took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp air as if awakening from a nightmare. Only this time, I was the one who had won. When I arrived home, I found Daniel sitting on the couch, his expression unreadable. He had stayed out of the meeting at my request. I didn't want him to try to interfere, didn't want guilt to weaken him at the last moment. But now that it was all over, he deserved to know. He stood as soon as he saw me walk in. How did it go? I tossed my bag onto the table, took off my coat, and let out a light sigh. It went exactly as it should. Daniel studied me for a few seconds, and then he understood. Is Amanda finished? Completely. He didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He just nodded, running his hands through his hair, exhausted. Not because of me, not because of himself, but from the shame of having a sister capable of such betrayal. What's going to happen to her? I crossed my arms, leaning against the kitchen table. She lost everything. The company, the assets, The money. She has nothing. Not even the support of her own family. Daniel's parents, still in shock, didn't know what to do. They had always spoiled Amanda, always treated her as the perfect daughter, turning a blind eye to her obvious flaws. But now, there were no more excuses. She hadn't just disgraced them, she had tried to ruin her own brother out of sheer envy. The disdain in their eyes was the last thing Amanda saw before she left that room. And Mauricio? I let out a quiet, ironic laugh. A coward, as always. As soon as he realized there was no way out, he distanced himself from her. Tried. To wash his hands of the blame, pretended to be a victim. But his name was on the documents. In the recordings. He's just as ruined as she is. Daniel rubbed his face, exhausted. This is all unbelievable. I stepped closer to him and took his hand. It's over now. And I truly wanted to believe that. I wanted everything to end right there, in that moment. But the truth was, for Amanda, this was just the beginning of the end. In the following days, the news spread. In the business world, corporate betrayal is something no one forgets. Everyone learned that Amanda had tried to steal from her own brother. Competitor companies, investors, old friends, they all abandoned her. She became a tarnished name, an outcast. She lost her house, lost her cars, lost her status. And worst of all, she lost the one thing she valued most: power. The last I heard of her, Amanda was living in a small apartment, trying to piece together the fragments of her own destruction. But there was no way back. As for me, I started over. Now that the company was in my name, I began restructuring everything. I established new strategies, cut off questionable alliances, and strengthened our contracts. Within a few months, the business was more profitable than ever. But the most important thing was that, for the first time, I felt peace. My son smiled again. He ran through the house without fear, slept through the night without me having to check on him. Daniel and I found a new balance, a relationship where he finally understood what I was capable of doing to protect my family. And Amanda? She tried to bring me down, but I was the only one left standing.